Can you hear me okay? I'm Gina Dugan. This is my husband, Stan Nickel. We're co-chairs of the annual conference program committee.
Yay!
Boy, Kathy's a hard one to follow. We'll try, but no guarantees here. The author, Markley Judy Foundation.
Here. Walk a step away from that. We don't want two of us.
The Author Markley Judy Foundation was established in 1923 by the Iowa Unitarian Association, one of the predecessors of Prairie District, to ensure one or more speakers to compute at each annual
Louder.
presenting topics along religious, philosophic, and scientific lines. The Reverend Arthur M. Judy was minister of First Unitarian Church in Davenport, Iowa. That's where we're going next year. Here's a plug for them. Davenport, Iowa, from 1881 to 1907. His leadership extended throughout the entire Unitarian movement in Iowa through the agency of the Iowa Unitarian Association, which he served as secretary from 1885 to 1892 and president from 1896 to 1906. Prairie District has continued the tradition and offers the Arthur M. Judy Memorial Lecture at each annual conference.
The 2009 Judy Lecture offers a perspective on religious, philosophic, and scientific lines through song and lyric. Songs for a Small Planet, songs about interconnectedness and the human journey, about beauty and the mystery of the world, whimsical, humorous, profound. His music breaks the boundaries of folk, transcends to a realm beyond everyday love songs, to a place of wonder at the very fact of life itself. From David Kleiner, Minor 7th Reviews, Peter Mayer is a performer who knows that the secret to living in a world of perplexing questions is enjoying the search for answers. It's no wonder the program committee found his song, Blue Boat Home, to be a good fit for our conference theme, and we're grateful to him for the generous use of his words. Peter Mayer began playing the guitar and writing songs in high school. He studied theology and music in college, and he spent 2 years in seminary. He's been on the road since 1995. He's produced 8 CDs, selling over 50,000 independently. Recently back from sold-out concerts East Coast to West. Please welcome Judy Lecture 2009, Peter Mayer.
Well, I'm very honored to be here, and thank you, Gina. I'm going to play a song for you all. I thought that would be a fitting way to begin, and then talk for a little while, since it is called a lecture. I'm a little nervous about that part. And then play some more songs for you. Hold on, Joe. I've got to unmute here. When I was a boy, each week, Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still, but but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Well, I thought when I was asked to do this this talk, I thought that it was very much at the heart of what has inspired and motivated me as a songwriter for these several past years, and so I thought it would be appropriate to just share with you a bit of my own journey and how I found Unitarian Universalism, and also how that ties in with my life as a songwriter, because the seventh principle is very much, like I said, at the heart of that. So I hope you don't mind a little bit of storytelling here. I have notes. Try to be concise. So I come from Catholicism, as I know a lot of Unitarians do. I grew up Catholic, 5 of us kids in St. Paul, and always was very interested in religion, even as a little kid, being enamored with the church with the Mass, the liturgy. And later in school, I became interested in ministry. And by the time I got to college, I was studying theology. I took a theology degree as an undergrad, and also was interested in seminary, interested specifically in the Jesuits. And I actually entered the Jesuits. If you're familiar with the Jesuits, they're an order in the Catholic Church. I entered the Jesuits after college for 2 years, what they call novitiate, which is the beginning of formation of a long journey for a Jesuit. And after 2 years, I decided I didn't want to be a celibate. Or rather, couldn't be a celibate, however you want to look at it. But I was very grateful for that experience. After that, I took a job which lasted for 8 years in a Catholic church as a music director. And I think it was during that time that I really found myself searching a lot. I think my road to UUism in a way began when I was already in college. I remember studying something they call process theology, which was talked about, instead of God being away from here, God is intrinsic to the life process of the planet and of nature itself. And I remember thinking that instead of talking about God as being unchanging, it talked about God as being always changing. And I loved that idea. It was the only page turner that I found in my entire study of theology, I have to say. And I also remember encountering something called Missa Gaia, which was a collection by a guy named Paul Winter and his friends that celebrated the 800th anniversary of the Franciscan Order. This was an album that really influenced and had an impact on my life. And Jim Scott, who many of you know, was one of the contributors to that collection. So the seeds of this sort of earth thing, if you will, was there early on for me, but it was really after I left the Jesuits and that I began in earnest to read all sorts of books. And it was books on science, on cosmology, physics, history, religion, anything I could basically get my hands on it. I really had an appetite to learn about the world, and during that time, I found myself becoming more and more uncomfortable with my Catholic faith. Just didn't really feel like it was resonating with me as much anymore. And I was learning this whole story that mostly science was telling me about the world. And at the same time that I felt like I was kind of losing my faith, so to speak, at least not being able to recite the creed in good conscience anymore of the Catholic Church. At the same time that was happening, because of what I was learning and how my worldview was changing, I felt like I was also gaining a real deep love for the universe itself and sort of just the magic of all of this. I was sort of overwhelmed by it, to be honest with you. I was a little bit not knowing what to do with it, with this sense of the world as being this incredible miracle of a place, and found it. The more I read about science, I found it very strange, as I mentioned in that first song, that any of this is here, any of us are here. How strange and wonderful that we're here.
and how incredible and just mind-boggling the universe is. The more that our human endeavor called science has revealed, has tried to learn this mystery about what's going on. What's going on here? You know, what is this place? You know, human beings show up on the earth and become conscious, and the detective story begins. You know, where are we? What are we? Who are we? What's going on? And I feel privileged to live in a time where we can actually really learn in a meaningful sense what the answer to that is. And the more I learned it, the more astonished I was by this story, and the more frustrated I felt that it wasn't there every Sunday. You know, that it wasn't there, that we weren't reminding ourselves of this story of creation, of who we are, what the story of our lives is. It wasn't so much that I disagreed with a lot of that the Mass had to offer, but I felt like there was a whole thing that wasn't there. So this was an interesting time for me. Let's see. I'm just going to refer to my notes here. There was two ideas during this time that really, I mean, there were many ideas, but two that really stand out that had a huge impact on me. Many of you are familiar with these ideas because I've even read the order of service for tomorrow, and I thought, well, why am I saying anything, you know? But I'll share it with you anyway. These two ideas I encountered maybe around 1990 or in the late 80s, and they're expressed in the following quotes I have. Well, the first quote is by Julian Huxley, and he said back in 1957, "As a result of 1,000 million years of evolution, the universe is becoming conscious of itself, able to understand something of its past history and its possible future. This cosmic self-awareness is being realized in one tiny fragment of the universe, in a few of us human beings. Perhaps it has been realized elsewhere too, through the evolution of conscious living creatures on the planets of other stars. But on this, our planet, it has never happened before." It has never happened before. Carl Sagan in 1980, "We are the local embodiment of a cosmos grown to self-awareness. We have begun to contemplate our origins, star stuff pondering the stars, organized assemblages of 10 billion atoms, considering the evolution of atoms, tracing the long journey by which, here at last, consciousness arose. A religion that stressed the magnificence of the universe as revealed by modern science might be able to draw forth reserves of reverence and awe hardly tapped by the conventional faiths." That represents one idea that had a huge impact on me. The other idea, a related idea, is this. Quote by Brian Swim. "After 3 centuries of scientific work, for the first time in human existence, we have a cosmic story that is not tied to one cultural tradition or to a political ideology, but instead gathers every human group into its meanings. We are in the midst of a revelatory experience of the universe that must be compared in its magnitude with those of the great religious revelations. And we need only wander about telling this new story to ignite a transformation of humanity." These kinds of ideas just got me really just sparking. And I didn't really know what to do with this feeling of sort of urgency and excitement about this. But I decided as a songwriter that, well, I should at least be trying to inject some of these values, these ideas, these notions into my songwriting. And now some of you, many of you may not know what I do, but I am a full-time singer-songwriter. After 8 years of of a part-time job in the Catholic Church as a music director, I decided with my wife, gee whiz, maybe we can make a go of this, you know? And so I quit that job in '95 and have been lucky enough to somehow be making a living as a singer-songwriter since. But the kinds of places I play are many of them are what you would call folk music venues. A number of them are churches. And what I try to do, and I play my own songs, and these songs have been largely influenced by this kind of thinking. And let me just read you. Okay, I see. I'm already getting scattered. This is going to end, you folks, and I will sing for you. The other thing that really had to do a lot with my kind of movement away from the Catholic Church, although I don't want to place any blame, I don't feel like a recovering Catholic like many people call themselves. I am constantly looking back to Catholicism for what I can learn from it and having a conversation with it because it's inside of me. But I felt very disillusioned with our culture as well as our church, as well as my church. The consumerism that felt empty and yet we needed to survive as a culture. I felt like that was really a dead-end road and not a sustainable path. And the religious part of it was, in terms of the religion, I felt like that this separation between God and earth, this between heaven and earth, that kind of thing that I felt was the story that the church was telling. I felt like we need to really get back to this place and try to really fall in love with it and feel connected, feel intrinsically connected to the earth, and maybe that will change who we are as a people and give us wisdom and strength to create a sustainable future. So this is I wrote this down and I want to share with you. This is my new goal as a songwriter, as I just jotted it down the other day that I came to, and I feel like I'm still striving for, was to celebrate the magic, beauty, and mystery of this world and our lives in it. I thought that we need more ways to connect deeply in a spiritual way with reality itself, as science describes it. Science is already doing it intellectually, but our emotional and spiritual lives need to catch up. So often religion has drawn comfort and inspiration from gods and heavens beyond this world and caused its believers to not feel at home here, thus to devalue this place. Maybe if we find ways to connect and identify with and rejoice every day in our life on this planet, maybe we will then find the wisdom and the fortitude to do what needs to be done to create a sustainable future for our children. That feels like what drives me as a songwriter. Not all my songs are about that, but I always come back to that as sort of a ground. Just a couple more things. I think that Unitarianism is uniquely positioned. Unitarian Universalism is in a unique position here because it comes from the religious tradition. It is a religion, although I often have this conversation with people. Is this really a religion? You know, I always ask other UUs that, and then we are often running onto an interesting conversation. But it straddles, I think, you know, this wide-eyed, dogged kind of need to rely only on empirical evidence, which is beautiful because that's what the world needs, I think. But it also wants to be a religion. It wants to feel something. It doesn't want to just think something. And I think these days we really need to cultivate a way where we can all feel a mystical experience of being earthlings and of being connected to this this epic story of evolution of the universe, and also to space, the space that is so vast and so sometimes feels so cold and difficult for us to come to terms with, to feel somehow an emotional connection to that. I tend to think that that's one of the things about the song Blue Boat Home that, if I may say, works for people, because it's an intimate metaphor. It's a romantic metaphor. This metaphor of seafaring is something that almost all of us have some kind of connection to. And yet it brings in something, it talks about something much larger and sometimes very difficult to grasp, that is our life in the universe, you know. I think that as a songwriter and also as a religious movement, to somehow cultivate metaphors that get our hearts going on this. I think that's a good place to stop. Let me just play a few songs for you that I feel kind of tie in with this idea. I don't know if you've read I'll just set this song up for you a little bit. I don't know if you read the book by Bill Bryson called A Short History of Nearly Everything. Wonderful book, isn't it? Just a wonderful book. Highly recommend that. In it, there's chapters about all different branches of science, and at the very end of several chapters about life itself, he says these words: "It cannot be said too often, all life is one. That is, and I suspect will forever prove to be, the most profound statement there is. All life is one." This, I think, song somewhat comes from that notion. Say that you stand apart, put a fence around your yard. You can build a tall rampart, guard it with a gun. You can dig yourself a moat, burn the bridge and burn the boat. It won't matter that much, you know, 'cause all the world is one. All the world is one. You can march in a big parade every Independence Day. You can raise up your own flag, sing your own anthem. It'll ring out in the air with the other anthems there. To the winds of the earth declare, all the world is one. All the world is one. Go and ask the Buddha when he's sitting under the tree. Go ask Walt Whitman when he's looking out at the sea. Ask Alan Shepard when he's standing up on the moon, staring at that pearl of blue. Ask an atom in the breath you take. Ask the water by the river bank. Ask a strand of DNA that's written in your blood. One life running in your veins, one life, one big bang. You can't try to separate it, but all the world is one. All the world is one. Go and ask the Buddha when he's sitting under the tree. Ask Annie Dillard when she's up on Tinker Creek.
when he's standing up on the moon, staring at that pearl of blue. You could take an outbound train, try to make a getaway. You can ride off like John Wayne to the setting sun. But earthlings don't leave town, they just go round and round till they figure out all the world is one. 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 Okay, I must acknowledge Connie Barlow and Michael Dowd, who many of you may be familiar with. They are itinerant preachers of the universe story, sold their only home not long after 9/11 and decided that their life's work must be to share the idea that we come from this universe story and what are the implications for our emotional and spiritual lives. And I really was excited to learn about them, not too many years ago actually. And anyway, they as well as I were very inspired by some of the ideas that I already shared. And this next song came from Brian Swim. He has a little book called The Hidden Heart of the Universe. I think that's what it's called. I was looking for the book when I was putting this together and I lost it. Sad to say, but The Hidden Heart of the Cosmos, I think that's what it's called. It's a tiny little sort of meditation, and in it he has suggestions as to what some exercises might be for us to get a sense that we're actually on a planet. Because again, all of us know this now, but it's really hard to feel that because it's not intuitive. You know, that's why we didn't know this for most of our history as human beings. But he recommends a couple of meditations, and the first two verses of this next song are those very meditations. I also wanted to, although it felt like I ought to end this talk with this quote, but I wanted to precede this song with it, so I think I'll read it to you now because I don't want to forget to read it. I don't want to run out of time to read this quote. This is a beautiful passage by the minister at my church, Victoria Safford, who I have great admiration for. And I'd like to read this for you and then play the song for you. I do have it set up. See, I'm getting old, so I need my words, my lyrics. I just want to make sure those lyrics are sitting there. What if there were a universe, a cosmos, that began in shining blackness, out of nothing, out of fire, out of a single silent breath, and into it came billions and billions of stars, stars beyond imagining, and near one of them a world, a blue-green world so beautiful that learned clergymen could not even speak about it cogently.
And brilliant scientists, in trying to describe it, began to sound like poets with their physics, with their mathematics, their empirical, impressionistic musing. What if there were a universe in which a world was born out of a smallish star, and into that world, at some point, flew red-winged blackbirds, and into it swam sperm whales, and into it came crocuses, and wind to lift the tiniest hairs on naked arms in spring when you run out to the mailbox, and into it at some point came onions out of soil, and came Mount Everest, and also the coyote we've been seeing in the woods about a mile from here, just after sunrise in these mornings when the moon is full. The very scent of him makes his brother, our dog, insane with fear and joy and ancient inbred memory. Into that world came animals and elements and plants and imagination, the mind and the mind's eye. Now this is the last little segment of that, and I want you to pay special attention to this because I feel like this is our job right here. In such a universe, if such a universe existed and you noticed it, what would you do? What song would come out of your mouth? What prayer? What praises? What sacred offering? What whirling dance? What religion? And what reverential gesture would you make to greet that world every single day that you were in it? When I go outside at night and look up and the stars are bright, sometimes I lay on the ground and imagine that the sky is down. And if the earth should then let go, I'd fall into the stars below. I'd fall into the stars below. When I see the red sunset in its quiet splendor, I reflect that the sun's not going down at all, but the earth is turning somersaults. And through a sunlit sea it trails, and we are on that great big whale. We're riding on that great big whale. When I try to grasp the simple fact of this existence, think of all the fantasies, fairy tales and wishes, none strike me as more unlikely or magnificent than this is. And faces seen up close are galaxies through telescopes, crimson hillsides in the fall. More astounding than them all are pondering minds with eyes that see them. These are deep mysteries, deep mysteries.
simple fact of this existence. Think of all the fantasies, fairy tales and wishes. None strike me as more unlikely or magnificent than this is. Like a strange enchanting play of impossible dimensions, the setting and the stage run like years in all directions, and the breathless scenes and the storyline defy comprehension. When I think of all the roles in this production, all I know is I'm in the cast, but could it be I'm also in a front row seat to sit in my amazement, gazing to ooh and ah, to sigh and say, my, what a wonderful play. I mentioned process theology before, and I think that this song is related to that. This was, let's see, I actually wrote this when I was having a bit of difficulty in my life and was feeling kind of depressed, and I think one of the challenges of the UU movement, and certainly of this way of thinking about the world that I've been talking about, is that, you know, where do you go for comfort? I think one of the things that religion has traditionally delivered is comfort in certain packages, you know. I think the West has traditionally delivered it with a God who is the other and who is sort of a parent, and that we can sort of become that parent's child and be comforted by that parent, hold their hand, so to speak, or have them hold us. And in the East, perhaps you could say it's the comfort has come because you're not really you after all, are you? You know, you're just an expression of a greater reality. And so if you identify yourself with that greater reality, then suffering goes away. I mean, it's a powerful concept. I think they're two different concepts. I think that in my life, I continue to use different ones depending on the situation, you know? But I'm conscious when I'm doing it. This song, one of the interests I have as a songwriter is to take these cherished sort of symbols and language that I grew up with in the Catholic Church and the Christian tradition, because they just don't seem to go away. You know, sometimes there's no other word than Alleluia. There's just no other word, you know? And I'm very happy that it seems, I read recently that they're proposing changes to some of the language in the 7 principles, and I think one of the language change, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,
afterwards, because I don't have time to talk about it right now, is we're going from respect the interdependent web to reverence for the interdependent web. I was very excited to learn about this. And we're going into religious, mystical language with that change. And I think it's because respect isn't enough. You know, it's like we need to reverence it. We need to, that's what I love about traditional religion and in so many forms, not just Catholicism. There's kneeling, there's bowing and prostrating because you're before the mystery that animates your life, you know? And sometimes it just doesn't feel right to just stand there and sip a cup of coffee. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, we won't get into that either. Or sit there and sip a cup of coffee. But it's like you're coming into the presence of something, not literally, but you're disposing your heart. It's a disposition of the heart and mind that I think religion has helped us with throughout the centuries to create a different space, a sanctuary. And so you walk into this space and it changes you because of a deliberate decisions that you're making, you know, what you're doing with yourself and the space itself. Anyway, I have no idea what my point was. But what I'm gonna do is just play you this song, okay? I think I was talking about religious language and how I still find myself using it in my songs because it's just important, and it's important to ask ourselves again and again, I think, what that means and to not be afraid of it, you know, because sometimes it just doesn't work to say the great whatever instead of God, or, you know, that's just another example. In the ever-shifting waters of the river of this life, I was swimming, seeking comfort. I was wrestling waves to find a boulder I could cling to, a stone to hold me fast, where I let the fretful waters of this river around me pass. And so I found an anchor, a blessed resting place, a trusty rock I called my Savior, for there I would be safe from the river and its dangers, and I proclaim my rock divine, and I pray to it protect me, and the rock replied, God is a river, not just a stone. God is a wild raging rapids and a slow meandering flow. God is a deep and narrow passage, a peaceful sandy shoal. God is a river swimmer, so let go. Still I clung to my rock tightly, with conviction in my arms, never looking at the stream to keep my mind from thoughts of harm. But the river kept on coming, kept on tugging at my legs, till at last my fingers faltered and I was swept away.
So I'm going with the flow now, these relentless twists and bends, acclimating to the motion and a sense of being led. And this river is like my body now, it carries me along through the ever-changing scenes by the rocks that sing this song. God is a river, not just a stone. God is a wild raging rapids in a slow meandering flow. God is a deep and narrow passage, a peaceful sandy shore. God is a river swimmer, so let it go. God is the river swimmer. So let it go.
Well, I'll play one more song. I feel like I'd like to. I know you all don't. Maybe you do have the words, but I'd like to maybe end with "Blue Boat Home." It would be an honor for me to be able to sing that with you all, and it feels right since this is a church group that we all sing together for the last song. I want to say thank you again. Thank you, Gina, and thank you everybody who was involved with inviting me to come here. It really is an honor to be here. I know I've already sort of said it in this talk, but the last thing I would say is that I really do believe, even though, you know, this movement is a small, relatively small band of proud people. And the other question I often ask, sort of throw out on a table if I'm with a group of Unitarians, is I'll ask them if they think it will ever be bigger. Interesting. Yes, well, you know, it is an interesting question because it might be just maybe the human, the archetype of the human mind isn't necessarily set up for ultimate mystery, you know? It is an interesting question though, but I do think that this particular principle, if you will, I think that is at the heart of what this movement can be, and I feel presumptuous saying this because I don't want to step on anybody's feelings about UUism. It's a vast and diverse group, but I feel like this is really an important thing that UUism can give to the world, is to make sacred this place and to make people feel that in a mystical, in a religious way, because I think it's a hard thing to pull off. It's a hard thing it's easier, I think, to rely on the supernatural, but when you're just rooted in the natural world, you got to find the magic in it and the mystery in it, and to make that come alive for people and to draw strength, comfort, meaning from that. But I really feel strongly that is an important call, an important mission of this movement. So now, what I'd like to do, actually, we can do this one of two ways. Now, I don't know if you have any questions at all for me, but I was told that there would be a few minutes at the end, so we'd go till 1/4 after and have a few questions and answers if you had any questions. we could maybe close that with Blue Boat Home. It might feel nice to just close with a song. Would you agree? So maybe let's hold off just for the moment on Blue Boat Home, and then just open it up for questions if you have any, or rebukes. Yep.
When did you first hear of and know of UUism, and how did that happen for you?
Okay, thank you. That's the part I actually left out of the story, not intentionally, but I was running out of time. But I discovered I was rather angry. I was rather angry because here I was looking for a church, and my wife and I would go around going to different churches, all different kinds, and ask ourselves. And we had now, without there's an expletive involved with this story. I know there are children present. I'll use the acronym for the word. But we had something we called the BS factor, and if we could sit through an entire church service and not mutter bullshit under our breath, then we were probably in the right place. Yeah. And the Unitarians won. Yeah. But what made me angry is I didn't even really know about Unitarianism, Unitarian Universalism. UUism is what I call it, although I wish there were another word, but it's easy to say. I didn't know about UUism really, and I wish I had earlier. I spent a few years kind of floating, and I'm embarrassed to sometimes call myself a UU because I hardly ever go to church because I travel all the time, and I also have a bit of a reclusive nature. So I get nervous, going to church sometimes. Ironic, but anyway. That's how I found out about it, I guess. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you given any version of this presentation in a Catholic context, particularly a Catholic worship context? And if so, what was their level of receptivity or response?
Well, have I done this in a Catholic context? And no, interesting, I will say this. I learned about the universe story from the Catholics. From the Catholics. Now, there is a Catholic nun who is doing Canticle to the Cosmos video series. She runs an organization down in the Twin Cities. I don't know if she's still doing it, but there's an organization called Wisdom Ways in St. Kate's that is very active with this way of thinking. Thomas Berry is a Catholic priest. Brian Swim is still a practicing Catholic as far as I know. On and on the list goes. So it's interesting because even though the Catholic hierarchy and would probably frown on this way of thinking, there's all sorts of Catholics who are steeped in a sacramental theology who are bringing that to their view of the world. And so the answer is no, not really have I done this, but I'm aware of this current in Catholicism, even with the conservative movement nowadays. There's this current where Catholics are really, really interested in this stuff. So who knows? Who knows where that story's going to go? But Unitarians are quicker to change and adapt, and I think that's where the power of this movement comes. The Catholics might be talking about this stuff actually in the Mass, maybe in 5 centuries. But we can do it now. We can bring it into worship now, and that's the beauty. That's the beauty of UUism, I think, among other beauties as well. Yeah. Yep.
You've mentioned several wonderful quotes and things. I wonder if there are 1 or 2 pieces of literature that are especially inspirational to you or have guided your thinking.
Yeah, thank you. The question is, what about a few books that I might recommend? Well, The Universe Story by Thomas Berry and Brian Swim is really sort of a Bible, if you will, of that movement. Bill Bryson, I mentioned Bill Bryson, a brief history of nearly everything, or short history. That's not so much a religious book, but it's very easy to read. It's funny, and it talks about science, the sort of evolution of science in this country or in the world through the last 300 years. Chet Ramo, if you know of Chet Ramo, just a beautiful author. Skeptics and True Believers, I think, is the name of a book that I loved. Let's see. that's just a few that come to mind. There are so many, but Chet Ramo is a very wonderful sort of just essayist too, where you can just take a page or two at a time, and he really puts you in a space of awe and wonder. Those are just a few that come to mind. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Yep.
Following up on that last comment, and realizing you moved through life with a reverend air, is there a particular sacred place or circumstance that you go to or transport yourself when you're composing?
Oh, the question is there a sacred space or sort of a way that I enter into a space of in composing? No. I wish it were so, but you know, I find interestingly, you know, as many of you who are artists may attest to, I'm not sure, everybody's different, but you try to make something that's elegant in its final form, but the way there for me is really a lot of work. And it's especially when I get into the lyric writing, I pull out rhyming dictionaries and thesauruses and just, it's very messy, frustrating business. And I love it, so I still do it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it. But I think that as many writers might say, the important thing is that you show up. You know, you just show up. At the end of 2 hours work, you might have nothing to show for it, but you put your butt in the seat and you try again, and you do it on a regular basis. I think that's what's helped me. Yep.
A little bit more of your musical background and mentors.
Musical background and mentors. Well, I studied. I learned for the first couple of years in high school. I just got a chord book, memorized chords, and that's what I still tell people if they're learning guitar. Memorize chords, because then you can learn half a dozen or a dozen chords and play songs. It's a wonderful instrument that way. But when I got to college, I studied classical guitar for a few years. I also studied some music theory, although I'm still, I wish I had more of a grasp of that. And I've also been a student over the years of what guitarists call American fingerstyle guitar. It's probably too much to say American even nowadays, but fingerstyle guitar is acoustic. It's more fingers, not just a flat pick, you know. And you know, Leo Kottke, Michael Hedges, Preston Reed, Pierre Ben-Suzanne. Those are some names of whose music I've learned through the years as an instrumentalist to try and learn new tricks on the guitar. And I still find myself, if I'm good, I'll try to learn something new. There's always something to learn, as we all know. Yep.
Could you comment on how singing together can help us enter the mystical experience, like choral singing or singing who go home with you?
Well, the question is, how can group singing help us enter into the mystical experience? I'll tell you, I don't know if I feel too expert on that, because even though I'm a singer, I usually sing by myself. And I relish the times when I can play with other people and sing with other people. I mean, it almost goes without saying, it's incredibly powerful experience, is it not? It's very mysterious. None of us knows why music affects us the way it does, really, but it does. And it's a very important vehicle, I think, for worship, for finding a connection to one another, feeling that connection to one another. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I'm so glad that there's a strong musical tradition in Unitarian Universalism. I hope it continues to thrive and grow. Yeah, are we getting to the end here?
No.
Oh yeah, hi Jan.
I was really intrigued by your comments about how we find comfort in our liberal faith.
Do I need this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was really intrigued by your comments of how we find comfort in our liberal faith. And I want to say two things. I think we can. And I think that's part of our task as religious liberals, is to find faith and to find comfort in the reality that we are all one. And as someone who has lived through the most challenging year of my life, I want to say that part of the comfort I found was in your music. to that liberal faith and was a real source of comfort. So I just really want to say thank you for your ministry of words and theology. So
Thank you, Jan. Well, I don't know, folks. It's feeling like it might be time, huh? So thank you so much, Jan, for that, and thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for singing on this last song, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. Okay. Yes, that sounds perfect. You know, I'm playing instrumental music, but it just occurred to me that it might be nice to just do the first verse a cappella, and then perhaps listen to each other's voices while we're doing it, and then we'll launch into the second and third verse with the guitar. Okay, so. Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home. If you have harmonies in you, you know, you can sing those too. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I fly the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hear the great winds urging me on, read the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathom, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thank you.